Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. So one of the interesting aspects of the trips to Mississippi was logistics. We had to get people, their luggage, and their tools from Origsburg to Gulfport and back again. In the first 3 years, we all traveled together by vehicle or vehicles. In 2007, there were only 10 of us, so a 15-passenger van and a 6x12 U-Haul trailer were all we needed to get ourselves and all our gear, luggage, sleeping bag, pillows, tools, to our destination. Those of us who were a bit handy, and I'll count myself in that category, were weekend warrior types. Our tools were basically hand tools and some basic power tools. And we were able to pack our trailer so that the toolboxes and 5-gallon buckets holding hand tools would not move around and spill. Of course, I'm not sure that that's the best use for sleeping bags and pillows. And we had plenty of extra space in the trailer. Now in year 2, 2008, there were 20 of us. So it was 2 15-passenger vans and a 6x12 trailer. Now somehow Ruth and I wound up packing the trailer as we were getting ready to leave Origsburg. We had the same gear, but twice as many folks. Sleeping bags, pillows, tool buckets and boxes, suitcases and backpacks, but everything fit. But we had very little extra space. Then we hit 2009. At one point, we were looking at 44 to 48 people going. Not only had the team grown in size, but also in skill level. We now had some experienced tradespeople going with us, people whose tool collection included far more than the basic hand tools and small power tools that the rest of us owned. Tools that we would need in Mississippi. And we also had a kitchen crew, and our gear would now include food and kitchen supplies. Now, fortunately, among those 44 to 48 people were 3 members of a family that owned a sign manufacturing business. And that sign manufacturing business owned a fleet of box trucks, one of which would cart all our gear to Gulfport and back again. So one problem was solved, but that led to another problem. How do we pack everyone's gear so that nothing is damaged and things are not sliding all over the truck? Then one day, one of our local contractors walked into a facility where over 100 of these totes were stored, empty. And the owner of the facility wanted to get rid of them. Each of us got 2 of these totes. In one went your sleeping bag and your pillow or sheets or blankets and all the other soft goods you can fit into it. And in the other went your tools and other work gear. If someone was bringing tools that they could not, if someone wasn't bringing tools, if they could pack their clothing in small bags and put it in one of them and not bring a suitcase, that was great. But if you were bringing tools and you needed to bring a suitcase, that was okay. The deal was this: if it was essential for the work we were doing, bring it. We'll make room for it, but leave the rest behind. So after healing the woman with the hemorrhages and the synagogue leader's daughter, Jesus decided to head to his hometown of Nazareth and take the disciples with him. Now remember, this is Mark's gospel. In Luke's gospel, Jesus began his ministry in Nazareth. In Mark's gospel, Jesus started his ministry in Capernaum. It was in Capernaum where he healed the man with the unclean spirit. It was in Capernaum where he called the disciples. And it was in Capernaum that his family traveled because they wanted to capture him after hearing people say he had lost his mind. So after all this has taken place, Jesus now goes back to his hometown. And lo and behold, winds up in the synagogue on the Sabbath and begins teaching. The initial reaction is similar to what we heard back in chapter 1. when Jesus was teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. In Capernaum, the people were astounded at his teaching and thought, wow, he's teaching as one with authority, not like the scribes. Well, here in Nazareth, they're also astounded. Where did he get all this? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? But unlike in Capernaum, this is not a positive reaction. You see, the people in Nazareth have a problem. They know Jesus. They've known Jesus forever. And this is not who Jesus is supposed to be. The people go from being astounded to being offended. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? Isn't his family here with us? Now, there's a few things going on here. Back in chapter 3, Jesus' family came to Capernaum to capture him and take him back to Nazareth. They did this because of what people were saying about him. People like the scribes and the Pharisees who claimed he was a demon. I wonder if they had a nickname for him, like Crazy Jesus. The people already had an idea in their minds that Jesus had gone out of his mind. Then as he is speaking, the people take their own shot at his character and his honor. See, in our context, we didn't hear it. We didn't hear the insult. For us, what was said was a statement of fact. But when the people described Jesus as the son of Mary, they were saying that he was conceived illegitimately. In that era and culture, a fatherless lineage would be scandalous. Now, what's interesting is, if you read this same story in Matthew and Luke, they corrected it. They said Mary and Joseph. They didn't want the scandal in their Gospels. So Jesus shows up in Nazareth to bring his message to people he has known all his life. The people have been told that he has lost his mind, so they react negatively to his teaching. Then, to build their case against Jesus, they question the legitimacy of his birth and his lineage. The third thing happening here is the rejection of God's message because of the messenger. Now, before we pounce too hard on the people of Nazareth, remember where they are coming from. They are in a social system where status was fixed. Jesus was born a carpenter's son and trained as a carpenter. Once a carpenter, always a carpenter. It was highly unlikely people in Nazareth could ever accept Jesus as a messenger of God. But how quickly would we accept our neighbor as a miraculous teacher or the Son of God? And now here's where this text gets interesting. You see, some commentators think Jesus was surprised by the people's reaction. We are told that Jesus could do no deeds of power except lay hands on a few people and heal them. The text tells us he was amazed at their unbelief. So a quick word here. Faith is not a necessary condition for healing. God's freedom to act cannot be limited in that way. If we read a few chapters beyond, and it's the story we're going to talk about next Saturday night, we hear a man ask Jesus to help his unbelief as Jesus was healing his son. So then there are the commentators who believe that Jesus went to Nazareth knowing that he would get that reaction from the hometown folk. Jesus was getting ready to take the training wheels off and send the disciples out 2 by 2 on their first missionary efforts. But before sending them out, they said, he wanted them to see if it was what it was like to be rejected and be able to bounce back again. Jesus was rejected by his neighbors, but he didn't stay down for long. The text tells us that Jesus went out into the villages and started to teach. So according to these commentators, Jesus used the people of Nazareth to teach the disciples a lesson in resiliency. So after providing the example of bouncing back, Jesus calls the disciples together and sends them out in pairs. And before sending them out, he gave them these instructions. Don't take anything with you but a walking stick and a pair of sandals. Stay at the same house the whole time you're in one place. And if you're not welcome somewhere, shake the dust off your feet when you leave. Now, I have to tell you, I don't believe that Jesus gave these instructions to try to normalize this stripped to the bones way of life for the Christian movement for all time. Believe me, I did not wear the same clothes every day in Gulfport, which I was especially grateful for in trips when I got to play in fiberglass insulation. But the packing instructions we were given in 2009, bring the essentials and leave the rest behind, applied beyond tools, clothing, and sleeping bags. It applied to attitudes and expectations as well. The essential attitude and expectation people needed to pack was an attitude of love and an expectation to serve. The attitude of love said that if the property owner wanted to talk, you put down your tool and you talked. The attitude said that I am here to work, not talk, had to be left behind. The expectation to serve said if you were asked to cut shingles to be used as ridge caps or keep air hoses from getting tangled while others use the tools attached to those air hoses, that is what you did. The expectation that I am not here to do grunt work had to be left behind. Now, what do we do, though, with the dust shaking instruction? While it may have been a first century decontamination rite or dissing ritual, do we really want to go around putting people down? Is that what we think Jesus wants from us today? Well, Pastor Moffett Churn, come on, Moffett, there she is, retired Presbyterian pastor. And when I saw that name, I had to Google it to find out who Moffett Churn was. It was just an intriguing name. Suggests that we see the dust differently. She said the dust on our sandals may be three things. It may be the stuff I cling to so I can throw it back in someone's face or produce it as evidence in the case I am building against them. Am I the only one guilty of this? Shake that dust off, Jesus is saying. Perhaps the dust on my feet is the psychological strings that link me to a confrontation or disagreement to the point where it defines me or diminishes my sense of call. Guilty. Shake the dust off your feet, Jesus said. The third thing that could leave dust on our sandals is the dust ball of cynicism, fear, and futility I walk around with every day. If I bring that home with me in my emotional suitcase, it's toxic to my spirit. There was a dust-shaking experience on that 2009 trip. If you recall, a couple weeks ago, I shared with you our surprise that someone was living in that trailer. The window openings are covered with old wood. The door is a piece of insulation held together by different pieces of scrap wood. And there are spots of rust and decay throughout the trailer, not to mention that all the tires were flat. We were eating lunch one day, and sitting next to me was a young lady 15 years old or so. She looked at the trailer and she looked at me and she said something along the lines of, "Why isn't he doing something so he doesn't have to live there?" Reminded me of the unfortunate statement I hear about people in poverty. All they have to do is pick themselves up by the bootstraps. So the young lady and I had a conversation. We talked about all the things that we didn't know about the man and the effort it may have required for him just to obtain that trailer and the situations in his life that may be preventing him from finding better housing. Because of that conversation, we left some dust behind in Biloxi, Mississippi. So as we venture forth to do God's work, let's put in our totes only the essentials we need to complete the mission. And be sure to include an attitude of love and an expectation to serve. when we return, let's come back with the gifts and blessing we need to receive and treasure, and in both cases, leave the rest behind. Amen.